Welcome to Just Business. This week on the show, Henry and I are going to talk about what we should do when we find out our products are causing unintended harm. Then, we talk about whether AI is really the right solution to the loneliness epidemic. And if you make it till the end of the podcast, Henry and I are going to chat about how we feel about sales. Henry, this might seem like out of left field, but I'd like to tell you a story about asbestos.
Classic. Throw it back.
You know, that classic conversation, that classic thing we all want to talk about always, asbestos?
Yeah.
A couple of months ago, my brother and his wife found out that their fixer-upper of a home had one more problem, which was asbestos insulation. Bummer, big bummer. And when I heard this, asbestos, growing up was always the big bad that, every elementary school teacher would complain about, when you'd see the little vignette to how hard their job is, they're complaining about the decrepit school building and how they're going to be killed by the asbestos in the walls. And
real
to
thing.
me, yeah, exactly. To me, I always interpreted that as asbestos is kind of like mold. It's something that happens to old buildings and just kind of creeps up on you, and it's the boogeyman in the walls, and then it kills you. And when my brother found out that his house had asbestos in it, I chose to do some more research and found, what is, I'm sure, common knowledge to everyone else, but was shocking to me, but is the fact that asbestos is something that we purposefully put in our walls.
Yeah.
This is for those who don't know, who are like me and are just uninformed, asbestos is a naturally occurring fibrous material that was used throughout the boom building years, post World War II, primarily in North America, from like the 50s through the mid 70s mostly, to like make things like insulation, to make things like PVC pipes, like essentially like natural fibrous plastics. And it was used basically everywhere. And starting in the 60s, but then around the 1970s, we figured out that it was super harmful. And while I was learning all this while I was on my honeymoon, my second honeymoon with Sarah while we were in Italy. Kind of like how when you, like, a friend of yours buys a new car or you get a new car or whatever, you start seeing that car everywhere. I started to see asbestos everywhere.
Okay.
And there was a town very close to where we were staying called Casale Monferrato, which is this like small Italian town near the Alps on the west side of the country. That was a major manufacturing hub for this company called Eternit, which made these asbestos building materials. I was reading in this like things to do near you, like pamphlet about Eternit in this town. And basically what happened is, asbestos is harmful when it gets in the air, and the people that were working in this factory and living in this town were exposed to like dramatic, sizable amounts of asbestos, airborne asbestos, and thousands of people died, both that worked in the factory and were just like children playing on playgrounds near it and all that stuff. Big bummer. There was a huge lawsuit against this company, in which it came out that the company had known for almost 2 decades about the dramatic effects that asbestos has on causing like asbestosis and all these other respiratory diseases, and that this was the cause of a lot of the deaths amongst this town. In 2014, so that lawsuit happened, I think, close to like the end of the 90s, and was not like actually finalized until around 2014. And the case was basically thrown out, as if to say, like, the statute of limitations on the harmful effects of this have passed. We're just throwing out this case. There was a lot of appeals, and last year, the town of Casale Monferrato and the families of the victims of the unethical, behavior of this company, got claimed to around $100 million. And the living founder, the only living founder, was sentenced to around 3 years in prison. And all of this, Henry, this like deep dive into asbestos got me thinking, like, what do we do when we realize our products and our businesses are causing harm? I feel like this is so relevant to today in like maybe even just like 2016 of like social media landscape, right? Like there was a lot of conversation about the harmful effects of social media. Now we're looking at like the harmful effects of AI and all these things. And I wanted to have a conversation with you about what is probably a very hard thing for us all to wrestle with, which is like, what do we do when this thing that we're idealistically building to try to help people actually harms them? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's such a sad story, really, because you can see how maybe there wasn't bad intentions in the beginning, but as, they got wise to the negative outcomes and these externalities, they didn't act. And that's a failure. And thankfully, people were held accountable. But it's really in our best interest as entrepreneurs, leaders, people in business to research and be aware of all the potential negative outcomes or those externalities that can do harm, and to take action against them. The question of what do you do when you realize you're doing harm, the answer probably depends on what exactly that harm is, but undoubtedly you do something, right?
Well, so how do you, I think that is like a great way to tease up the conversation, right? Like that's the short, if we were going to clip this, that's the thing we would, clip.
Yeah.
It's like it's in your best interest to recognize the harm and, study it, figure out like solutions before, like other people, before it becomes too bad so that you can minimize the impact. But what do you do when it's like fundamental to the thing that your business is doing? Like Eternet, this asbestos manufacturing company, like what were their options, right? Like what were the founders' options other than to, lie, cover up information, and gaslight employees about what's causing the like the downfall of their health, in terms of like the self-preservation of the business, right? There is no other, to me, like there, like in some ways there was no other choice for them.
It's interesting because you're positioning it as they have no other choice, mostly because it is a mountain of a problem to move. It's almost similar to like the oil and gas industry.
Exactly.
They know they're doing harm to the environment. What are they to do? Stop drilling altogether? That's risky and expensive and a little bit crazy. That's a mountain of a problem. We do see companies in the energy field, like Shell, invest in clean energy, invest in kind of EV charging stations, as I think we would agree they should do those things.
Exactly.
But do you stop the unintended consequence altogether? As a capitalist, that's tough, right? They've taken on the risk. They have a business. It's working. There's this negative externality that they're aware of. Actually stopping is hard. Like, how do you pivot everything? How do you go from a asbestos insulation company to an alternative insulation company as fast as possible without harming your brand, right? Because you can't really say,
we have to worry about the brand, Henry.
Well, in a way, it's like,
I know what you mean.
You want to make that shift without admitting our product is poisonous and kills people, right? Because then who's going to buy your next product if they, get wise to this? So that's what I think what you were kind of flirting with in the, like, you are forced to lie. And in a way, it's super sensitive, right? In the world of business, to actually do the right thing quickly and quietly is kind of how we like to think about it, I think.
And exactly like the, and I don't want it to be misconstrued. I'm not saying that like you you got to do what you got to do, and you got to lie and cover stuff up. I'm saying
Of course.
I can understand why they made the decision that they did, given the incentives that they had. And to
Yeah.
your point about like, how do you, quickly and quietly become a, all types of materials, like insulation company, I think that represents a really good point of what I was thinking about. As I've been pondering, meditating on this problem and trying to come up with, recommendations. One of the ones is like, make it really easy for you and your business to pivot into doing something else, right? One of the reasons that Etronet could not do that and had to take the unethical path, and again, I'm not trying to remove like responsibility for them. They did not have to, but felt back against the wall that was the only, possibility, is because they had invested so much infrastructure in building asbestos insulation. Right.
Yeah.
They were so specialized into making that the product that they sell, at least in this manufacturing facility, that, it seemed dramatically difficult to put things on pause and move into producing something else. Whereas if somebody that wants to prevent yourself from like being in this situation, like want to be flexible enough to pivot, making sure you're not that specialized, right? That you could reinvent yourself to become a completely different company, given the evidence that your current company is doing harm, is extremely important. But I want to ask you a question about the last thing you talked about, which is like the idea of brand, right? Like the idea of, I think there's a lot of incentive to cover up, right? Even if you are going to pivot, right? Because of this like fear of how you will be represented as a company later on, knowing that you've done harm currently. I think that being vocal, open, and honest immediately upon knowing information about the harms done by your product, and like talking through like the general plan to pivot or change or what you're going to do differently or whatever, actually builds a lot of street cred, like a lot of credibility with customers, goodwill with employees, goodwill with, people affected, like the rest of, society at large. Like,
Yeah.
don't you think that that's actually like a helpful thing instead of a harmful thing?
I do, but I'm quick to point out that this is a new age idea. This is not only a progressive idea, but this is what I think young people want out of the companies that they are customers of.
Mhm.
Boeing made so many mistakes in not being transparent about some of their recent drama in
Mhm.
manufacturing and safety. I live in Seattle, so I got to be careful about what I say. But Boeing as a company, it's legacy, right? That's not a new startup.
Yeah.
The culture of kind of covering things up and not scaring the market and keeping that brand as pristine as you can, that worked for them. We're now just in a different world. We're in a new
Mhm.
age where customers, they want to know, they want to be told things. And I think it definitely serves those that are kind of getting out ahead of these new trends in
Mhm.
business of full like person-led companies where we have, influencers starting brands where it's fully transparent, you're building in public. All those things are kind of fun and corny, but the real value is like what you're asking, which is be transparent about when you mess up, own it, and move on quickly. That's what people want today. And by people, I mean young people. Like
Mhm.
they want to be told information because we're so in each other's lives through phones and social media. People are just used to getting that and they don't like being lied to anymore.
I'd say that's the bigger thing. I think it's to me less so much a trend because we want to see behind the curtain, which is true. I think it's also that there is a deep distrust of companies. Like we have seen, like our generation plus or minus one, right? has seen how traditional businesses and companies have dramatically affected, like basically since the 1980s, like the overall well-being of the rest of society,
Yeah.
and are now demanding a higher standard. I think what's interesting though is you bring up like Boeing, some of these older like companies, but even if we think about recent history, like I mentioned Facebook's whole Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2016, right? Like the idea of these social media algorithms causing like unintended harm, right? Not only like on an individual level, but on a mass scale for our entire country. Um, like that's one, and I think Mark Zuckerberg did a really shitty job owning that was a huge mistake and like working to rectify that, and they still haven't. The other one that I think about, even recently, we talked about on this podcast, is Juul, right? Like the vaping, you know, VC-backed vaping company that, started as two founders who were addicted to cigarettes, wanting to find a safer way to smoke, which should have been a medical device, but with like the influence of venture capital and being swept up in like this, hyper-capitalist system, started marketing a product to children, in a world where like we beat smoking, right? Like no one would smoke a cigarette, but all these kids are addicted to vapes. Yeah, it's like I think it's easy to pass it up as like in today's day and age, people want transparency, whatever. I think it's also easy to forget that in so many ways, the default for your company is that you will do harm. That's just how our system is designed and operates. It's the incentive structures that we live in. And so if you want to do good with your business, quote unquote, that's really hard. The thing that I'd actually recommend you do is think about minimizing harm instead of maximizing gain. And it's a complete mindset shift that like dramatically affects how you run your business from day one. Yeah, and I agree, it's new age and weird, and I'm like a man with a mustache, like talking to a microphone, like saying all these things. But I also think it's like extremely important. And to your point, what people are looking for out of companies.
Yeah. Maybe I'm too close to the man in the mustache, but I don't think it's that far out. Like I don't think this idea is too outrageous. I often kind of kid with you off air about I'm a businessman and I'm just a businessman. The shift from saying my mission is to maximize gain versus minimize harm is really, really difficult. But that's what makes a business person valuable, right? Taking the responsibility to say, I'm going to shepherd this company. I'm going to be hyper aware and take care to minimize harm. It's easy to kind of just focus on maximizing good. That's selfish, right? That's going to be self-centered. That's easy. That's what we naturally want to do. If you want to be good at what you do and not just a businessman, that's what it takes. That's maybe that's reductive, but I think boiling it down to just that one phrase of minimize harm, that's what makes you really good at what you do. Anything else is you're kind of missing the mark, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting that you say like too close to man in the mustache, because slowly over time, Henry, I feel like you really have. It was always inside of you, the radical, but I really do feel like from whatever, almost 2 years of us talking on and off air now. Yeah.
I'm just creeping my way.
We're gonna need a new stand-in for the hyper-capitalists. We're gonna need a third host.
Yeah, maybe I can do my job and push back a little bit more, but
we need to give you like a persona.
Yes, I should have my own mustache that I bring in, and
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy. I try to be realistic in everything. And
Hmm.
the thing that I always fall back on is like, what is the human instinct? What does our society naturally promote? What are the incentives?
Yep.
Don't fight those because it's really hard. But in this case, yes, this is a huge mindset shift. It serves you in the long run, right? Like you're going to protect yourself from having to testify before Congress as Marky Mark.
Yeah.
You're going to protect yourself from killing thousands of people or addicting an
Yeah.
entire generation. You don't want those things. I know no one wants those things. There is no
Hmm.
one alive who says that is my goal.
My
I
goal.
want I want to testify before Congress and pay millions. That's what I
Mhm.
want. No. Like grow at all cost. No one is considering that cost as, yeah, that's fine. Like people want
Mhm.
to avoid that, so just avoid that. How do you avoid
Yeah.
it? Minimize the harm.
Yeah.
That should be your focus.
Yeah.
That's
And to
all I'll
like,
say.
yeah, to conclude a little bit more and bring us back to the asbestos story, none of the people that went into business producing asbestos related building materials thought to themselves, oh, I'm going to use this cheap, readily available natural material that, may cause people to get respiratory diseases to like make a bunch of money. The respiratory disease part was not known, right? And you think that, especially in software, I feel like people think about the harm being minimal, the potential harm being minimal, because things happen in a digital space and all that stuff. So we're protected. But this type of extreme harm can happen to any of us who are inventing new things and moving at the edges of technology. And so it's really, really important that we all think exactly about this reframe that I've stolen from Ursula Franklin's The Real World of Technology, which is a fantastic book everyone should read. But this is one of the things that she talks about uh, as like habits of socially responsible technology and technologists is minimize harm instead of maximizing gain. Boom, Henry, we've solved it. Everyone now will go forth and be good founders.
Yep.
But I want to transition us in a way to talk about that bleeding edge and talk about maybe some of these potential harms and get your take on this, you know, buzzword marketing thing that's happening again in the AI world, that AI is going to solve the loneliness crisis. What do you know about this kind of like theme of the AI landscape and AI startups?
My closest touch point with it is within the creator economy. Some top creators are having AI clones made of
Mhm.
themselves to essentially be chatbots, both audio and text based. I've demoed a handful of them. They are incredibly impressive, is what I can
Mhm.
say. That they're getting good really quick. And so this technology is already upon us, is I think
Mhm.
my first takeaway.
Yeah, yeah. And to provide a little bit more color on the types of things we're talking about, there are a fleet, if you will, of AI startups that are basically uh, pre-prompted versions of things like ChatGPT, where you can tell ChatGPT like act like um, Marilyn Monroe talking to me, blah blah blah, whatever it is. And basically, there are all these AI companies that just kind of like have those pre-prompts already built in, and so you enter a portal where it feels like you're talking to a real person that's been like pre-prompted to sound like them, and you just have a conversation. Um, Very, very common kind of like uh, pattern to kind of build a company off of. Um, and at the same time, for the past 15 years or whatever, there's been a growing epidemic in loneliness, either through the rise of social media or other social factors. COVID is like one that has, I think, exploded this. But there are a lot of primarily younger children who, for some reason or another, have kind of stunted social lives and social skills. And even like adults feel this way, where like there's a lack of, deep friendships and relationships, and it's hard to meet people and all these things. Bunch of different factors for that, but all the AI companies that are running these little skinned chatbots say our chatbot is going to solve the loneliness crisis, because now you can have friends that aren't human. Initial reactions, Henry.
Um, as somebody who wants more in-person relationships with humans, you know, I would love a solution. Give me more connection to my fellow man. I want it. I want to talk to more people. But clearly, on its face, AI is not a solution to that. It might be
Yeah.
a band-aid to keep you stimulated, interacting with a fake person online. But it isn't actually solving the root of the problem, obviously. So I think on its face, that is an exaggeration at best. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say.
I would agree with you. And obviously, just like when the internet first came out, most of these companies, when they say they're solving the loneliness crisis, are really saying that they're solving the like uh adolescent, like male humans that, are looking for sex. Like
Oh,
they've solved that problem. So just like the, old adage that the internet was made for porn. Like seems like AI chatbots are also made for porn. If you go on a lot of these websites, most of these pre-prompted chat personas are designed to flirt with you, act like your girlfriend, or like essentially sexed with you.
yeah.
Um,
And I see
which
the
is
same thing in my space where creators or the
Mhm.
creators that are using these AI chatbots are OnlyFans creators.
Yep,
So, we're definitely in that sex work industry, I think, when it comes to this.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, and so the rub there is that, um, you know, like I could spout off about like how fundamentally, uneducated a lot of these founders who are saying that they're solving the loneliness crisis are about like what loneliness is and like what human
yeah,
connection is.
yeah.
But I think that's unproductive for this conversation. The thing that I um kind of wanted to get your take on, Henry, is like the uh again, like we talked about in the primer of the show, the unintended outcomes of some of this technology. Um, uh, Recently, there was a great article done by the New York Times, uh, I think just called "Artificial Intelligence is or Loneliness is a Problem That AI Won't Solve." That goes into talking about how uh, it's very obvious that these are not real relationships. Like one of the fundamental issues is that the chatbot is designed to always be sympathetic and have time and energy for you, which is not something that a normal friend has. And you have to learn to navigate the like gives and takes and pushes and pulls and how to be both supportive, and how do you go through an argument, and like all these things that like you don't get when you have a chatbot. Um, which in some ways means that you are further stunting, like your social dynamics and making it harder eventually when you may have like a real social circle and group of friends to be amicable and build really good relationships with them. The other one is just that like a chatbot cannot provide you with human connection, right? Like there is no eye contact, body language, all these things that are, again, important for your social development. And those are just like the high level of the obvious why AI is not a substitute for human connection. The other one that's tough about this kind of like, mimic of a relationship is that, especially with like young men who are primarily using these chatbots, even though all the AI companies will tell you that, it's an even distribution and blah, 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 blah. Which, fair might be. But when you have a chatbot that's primarily interacting with you in a completely amicable way and like will, at the drop of the hat, start sexting with you as soon as you want, provides a really, really bad representation of how we should approach sex and relationships in real human worlds.
No,
What are your thoughts
absolutely
on that
right.
one, Ender?
No, I think you're right on the money there. I think what we're circling is this idea of online companionship isn't the solution to loneliness. The solution to loneliness is belonging, not
Mm.
companionship, right? Like,
Yeah.
even as a kid who grew up when in the dawn of the smartphone, and I would have online friendships, or as a gamer, you have these strictly online friendships.
Yeah.
Those don't make you feel like you have full belonging. It's almost like a one-dimensional relationship where it doesn't go deeper. You don't feel like, oh, I am like a valuable part of this community. I have achieved
Yeah.
belonging. You just feel, oh, these are my companions that I jump on and play games with, or I can chat about, these very limited number of things. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I would stake my flag on that. What we need is more belonging, more community, more fulfillment. Those are kind of the things we should be striving to provide in order to solve a loneliness crisis, not AI chatbot companions. Don't think that's going to work out.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that example of like hopping on to play games with your friends, because that, hits very much to home for me. My college friend group, Sarah calls them my boyfriends. Primarily, after we graduated, the way that we would interact with each other was solely through Fortnite. We would hop on, play some games, like talk through the microphone. And what's important to know is I am horrible at Fortnite. And the only reason I would get on to play this game, is did you have the for, and the game is the thing that gets in the way of that, right? Like someone storming in and destroying your builds and like you having to fight them can disrupt a deep conversation about like, what somebody's going through or whatever. You can quickly context switch from like, yeah, I'm thinking about like, moving out of my current place or whatever to, like that's just very disruptive. And in so many ways, I feel like that's the takeaway I have from this is like, because other people might see it differently. Other people might see that sort of situation of like you getting on to play games with your friends as like a way that you maintain that relationship, but in so many ways that's true, but in so many ways the game itself, the game we choose to play is either like helping or harming the maintenance of that relationship. For the past, almost 2 years, I've been slowly trying to convince everyone that we should get on to play board games on the internet, because I find board games to be much easier in terms of like, you can have a conversation and play a game at the same time. And we've been doing that for at least once a month for the past few months. It's been working great, right? And it's how this like technology can facilitate or detract from the maintenance of relationships. Back to our girl, Ursula Franklin, in the real world of technology, another thing that she talks about with socially responsible technology is whether it increases or decreases reciprocity between people. The example she gives is the telephone increased reciprocity from the telegraph and letters, because you got to have a synchronous conversation. You got to hear somebody's tone of voice. It felt more akin to being there with them, and got to unite you in a single point in time. Fantastic. Internet, maybe not that. It's asynchronous communications, kind of disruptive, all that stuff. So just like we can think about which game we're playing, whether it increases or decreases reciprocity, we can also think about the technologies that we're seeing today. Do they increase or decrease reciprocity in terms of human connection? I'd say AI in general decreases reciprocity even more than the internet, right? Like you see Apple Intelligence now summarizing all of your notifications from your mom like to the point where you're not even reading your mom's text message anymore, which was already an asynchronous form of communication. And now it's further removed because it's not in her tone of voice even at all.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. You see these things about like CEOs reading summaries of people's emails and then sending reply emails and then having that person read the summary of their reply email and say, what are we even doing anymore? We're not even talking. Like,
Yeah.
it's bizarre.
I hear what you're saying. Like, it does
Mhm.
appear to be bizarre. Your anecdote about staying in touch with friends via a game, I see that as the default for young people today, where they get home from school, they hang out in Fortnite. And from a
Mhm.
businessman's perspective, this is a big problem in the game industry because kids aren't buying new games. They're just hanging
Yeah.
out in Fortnite as a social, you know, area, right? This is kind of like the
Yeah. A
virtual
third
playground.
place.
Is their third
Yeah.
place, which has its own challenges, right? And it does, I guess, create friction in between this belonging or these fulfilling relationships. But there's a reason that there's a natural, drift onto those online spaces. And I think it's because it's easier, right? It's less
Totally.
difficult to maintain relationships. You have an excuse to maybe have a hard conversation or you can distract or escape. I think
Mhm.
we live in a tough, it's tough to be human, right? We don't need to qualify,
Mhm.
the time that we're in or,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
individual circumstances, but it is just the human experience is difficult, right? Relationships are challenging. It's hard. We feel a lot of different emotions. Online solutions, whether it's gaming or online AI chatbots, they provide some relief, but it
Mhm.
isn't a solution to the human struggle, right? Like you still have to
Exactly.
put work into these relationships. And any business person that is trying to tell you they have this quick fix to that, eternal struggle of human connection is probably snake oil, right? Like that's
Mhm.
probably not actually going to solve your bumps and your problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's like any technology that defines itself as saying, I will, solve one of the most difficult challenges of being alive, which is the fact that we're social animals that require other people to feel good about ourselves and our place in the
Yeah.
world. Like, it's just a load of crap. And I think that if, by some miracle, there is still listening some AI founder, I'd really, really, caution you from thinking about this technology um, in any sort of way that uh, is about promoting humanity. I think this is a very common refrain amongst a lot of AI optimists that like this is going to make the world better in some way because of, we're going to automate the toil or like whatever, and so that we can all be more human and like creative and whatever it is. Um, at the fundamental core of this technology, and even if you just see it from how it's being implemented, it is about removing and creating uh, like space between people. It creates a space between an author and a reader through like the ingestion of information and the like spit out of the word calculator. It's creating distance between you and your friends as it's sitting on your phone summarizing all your emails. It's creating distance between, you as like a young person and the world of experience out there for you by locking you into this even more than social media, like this like rabbit hole that can consume you and make you feel in the moment such a dopamine rush that like, oh, there's this thing that loves me, quote unquote, but it cannot love you. You can love it, it cannot love you back. It's a tough thing.
Super tough. You know, we exist in a capitalist system that, encourages entrepreneurs to take on great risk to solve great problems, right? Like
Mhm.
what you just said could almost be interpreted as if there's a huge problem of humanity, don't try to fix it, right? And that doesn't sound good. Like,
Mhm.
I want to change the world. I want to make it better. I want to help as many people as possible. And, you know, loneliness is a big problem. So I need
Mhm.
to fix this. That's just hard to do. Like, it
Yeah.
actually
And it's hard to
requires
do with the
something
digital
big.
technology. Yes, it requires something big um it's hard to do with the digital technology that fundamentally disconnects people
Yeah.
even further than kind of we're seeing the internet has. And I say this as like somebody who loves the internet and thinks it's a great thing, right? I'm not in love with AI, but um this is a hard thing. The thing I wanted to add as well is that yes, go tackle big problems, but know that technology is more than software. Like, we have been using technology for thousands of years to solve problems of loneliness. One of the main ones we've done is in urban development. Like the way we designed our cities and towns, the way we developed religion and other social structures in order to provide, and like religion as being just like a common social practice, you could say. Like all of these things are technologies that we have designed and used to solve the fundamental human problems. And it's just that those increase reciprocity and this
Mhm.
one decreases it.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental difference. So if you're an entrepreneur that wants to solve the loneliness crisis, go read, what the frick is it called? By Jane Jacobs. Hang on, I'm gonna look up a book.
Do it. Do it.
You
We
talk for a
got time.
second.
We got time. I think.
The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Go read that book, and yeah, see how maybe you can decrease loneliness in your world.
Yeah. To kind of tie it back to our first topic of, minimizing harm. If you feel your pitch deck or your business solution is a shortcut, it time to ask some questions, right? Like if it's a big
Great
problem,
recommendation.
it requires a big solution, like an
Hmm.
overhaul of the city planning, right? That's a big
Yes.
solution to a big
Hmm.
problem if there is one. But a little chat bot probably is a shortcut, right? That isn't a
Hmm.
big solution. That's a little tiny bit of software that isn't incredibly innovative, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think if you stumble across something that feels like a shortcut, it's probably bad. It probably
Hmm.
is not only a partial solution, but will have harm, right? Like it's
Yes.
not good. So be careful.
Yeah. In our next episode, Henry and I are going to brainstorm some MVPs for urban planners. How can
Great.
urban planning? How can we
I
make
can't wait.
minimum viable urban planning? Okay, Henry, let's get on to our last topic. Uh, Something we always try to do something more accessible at the end of the show. We try to go from high extreme to low. This one might not be that low. We're going to talk about something that's like the hardest thing for both Henry and I: sales. Henry, you are the one that put this on our docket today. Tell me why.
Yeah. Sales is really challenging because I don't like to lie. I like to be super
Hmm.
honest. And a lot of times when I think about sales, you almost are pressured to overpromise. Like, this is going to change your life. And I'm going to convince you that this is really a big problem. You're not being asked, hey, I'm out of eggs. I really need eggs. Oh, great. I'm an egg salesman. Here you go. Like, you, the act of sales is like convincing and then oftentimes overpromising, which I I struggle with both of those. I don't like to do them, but I feel pressured into doing it, especially as an early stage founder where you don't have a lot to offer and you're trying to figure out, does my problem really exist? That's my struggle.
I resonates so much with me. Uh,
Okay.
the number one reason that Lou Mastic died was that I did not want to sell it. I didn't want to. I didn't like doing it. I was constantly giving discounts to literally everybody that like walked into our platform to be like, oh my God, thanks so much for being here. He was like a year for free, like, which is, like a bad thing. Don't do that. But I want to contrast that with an experience I've just had this week, which I think on a previous episode of the show, I mentioned that I've started an apparel.
Yes.
I started a business so that I could buy wholesale some t-shirts for myself, and ended up opening up an order form for other people, friends and family, people that subscribe to my newsletter, all that stuff, to be able to do a bulk order with me this time around. And I'm not giving stuff away for like free or negative money, which is what I did last time. I like did my little spreadsheet calculation of like, okay, this is how much it costs. This is how much it costs to acquire. This is how much it will cost in labor to fulfill the orders. This is how much shipping is, blah, 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 blah. Came out to, we're selling shirts for around $17, depending on which one you get. And to date, we have sold $576 worth of t-shirts in a week, which is pretty cool. Like, there's been far more interest from far more people than I had expected. And it makes sense. It's a great quality product from some ethical manufacturers, and we're giving it away for I think, reasonable price. And the reason that I feel no guilt, shame, and even excitement about sharing that number instead of like, guilt, is that super transparent, right? Like, I was super transparent about like what the upfront like cost is to me, how much this, what the unit economics are, and how much money that like we're taking home in terms of like paying Sarah to ship all these orders.
Shout out, Sarah.
So shout out, Sarah. And so I have no guilt on my conscience that I am swindling anybody, which is, I think, one of my biggest fears in sales, nor do I feel like I'm lying to anybody about how good the product is and whether it's worth the amount of money that it's worth, because I've shared everything, right? Like, and it's been a completely different experience for me where like I'm excited to talk to people and say like, you should buy this. Whereas like I would never, ever, ever, when I was working on Lemastic, want to tell them that they should have subscribed to our pro plan. Right.
Yeah.
Just like is like the pit in my stomach, right? Asking for money. Just completely different.
Yeah.
So what do you think is different, Henry? Like what feels different about these situations?
After knowing you for a while, you've been kind of circling around this uncomfortability with profit. Don't like profit, not really sure where it fits into the world.
I've named the company Not-for-Profit Apparel.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the idea of kind of just removing that as a goal and as a part of the price tag, I think definitely helps you make the sale.
Totally.
Right?
Exactly.
When I think about businesses that have morally good goals or missions, I often the pessimist in me says, but the consumer doesn't care. Like, I shop at Adidas. I don't really care what the unit economics are. I trust that the value that I'm, getting in return for my dollar is worth it. And the fact that they recycle ocean plastics, that's enough moral good to get my dollar. Now that's just kind of a ramble. I like what you're doing and it makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm a customer, so I'm on board. Yeah, so I'm on board. But I think the problem of profit can't be deleted by most, right? Like, you're trying to get rid of that. The problem of profit is kind of a big one, because you almost have to forecast, what are my future expenses going to be? Like right now,
Exactly.
your unit economics, but what happens if you sell 1,000 t-shirts? Like, I can't really foresee how many people am I going to have to hire. Do I have to give them benefits on top of the salary? Do I have to, purchase more equipment? And so I do have some empathy for the corporations or the business people that have to sell a $7 t-shirt for $70, because it really does come down to like this projection of, okay, what's the profit I need to have? You and I might look at it and say, oh, the markup is 300%. That seems exploitative. But
Mhm.
there are these expenses that are almost unknown that you don't want to kill the company, then you can't help
Mhm.
anybody. So
Yep.
this problem with profit, I've seen you struggling with. I also struggle with it, but
Mhm.
I don't know if I can just delete the problem because we need money to make the world go round, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, even in that example that you just gave, like of, oh, well, what happens if things grow and you need more stuff, whatever. I feel like I would have no qualms. Like I add the little byline to the spreadsheet, right? Like I communicate to everybody that this is how we came to the number of like how much this thing costs. And here's the new price.
Yeah.
Right. Like, which we may have to do, right? This is the first order we've done. We might find out that this is a lot more complicated logistically to do. I'm still super worried about whether I've estimated shipping correctly. But
Yeah.
but like, like there's all this stuff that could happen. But I feel like if we had to make changes, I'd make the change and feel just the same,
Yeah.
right? Like Adidas, right? Like if they published that this is exactly what it takes to make all of our stuff, and like this is how much profit we take home, which for apparel is like usually close to 50% of the worth of the garment or the value of the item. Like, would you feel different? Would it be easier as an entrepreneur to sell that item? Like, I don't know.
In today's age, I do think it would be easier. Like I said earlier, like
Hmm.
transparency, I think is so important for people because they have lost trust in institutions and corporations.
Yep.
They got no trust to give. And so transparency is a wonderful long-term solution. The thought experiment that maybe we can go through live is
Let's do it.
when calculating your price tag, estimating variable costs, easy, right? Like as you learn more about your shipping costs, that can easily
Hmm.
translate into the price tag. What happens for your company if you decide, I don't just want to do blank t-shirts, I want to screen print my own designs. And in order to do that, I need to purchase a $1,000 screen printing price of equipment. How do the
Hmm.
fixed cost play a role into the price tag? Like how do you do that without feeling bad or exploitative or losing money? Right?
So I'll give you a real example of this.
Okay, cool.
There's the cost of the garment from the manufacturer. For one of the shirts, it's $11. There is a cost, a fixed cost of a flat rate shipping from the manufacturer to get to me. And that cost is around $28. So how, when I was making the spreadsheet, was I to distribute this $28 flat fee that does not change depending on how much we sell?
Yeah.
I mean, it does if we sold like astronomically more, but we weren't going to get there. We were going to be in the $28 band. Um, yeah, if I sold 50 t-shirts, that would be whatever $28.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so,
I'm with
yeah,
you. This is
like
a small
under
fixed cost. Yeah.
exactly. It's a small fixed cost, and how do I like distribute that evenly amongst the customers? And basically, the thing that I came out to is that it comes out of the byline that is mine and Sarah's labor. So,
Really?
so if we sell more shirts, we per shirt make more money in that labor area. I don't know if I would do this for larger expenses, but this is the example of how I've done it now. And so then the incentive with us, right, is, sell more shirts to decrease the amount that we lose, right? But there's not the reverse, which is we factored in some like flat rate amount to everyone, which I did think about doing, of just like an average, how many do we expect to sell, which I think would also have been fine. But just
Okay.
for my own conscience, And because it's the first run of us doing this, I was like, whatever. I'm basically doing this for fun. We'll eat the 28 that isn't covered if we don't sell enough shirts.
Yeah.
But we like way, way, way outperformed like that cost of shipping. So like I'm happy.
Okay, cool.
But again, yeah, if I had to pay for an $1,000 screen printing machine,
yeah,
right, like I don't know. I feel like that goes down to an estimate of like how many customers does it feel reasonable to pay for this? Right? Like, is it 500? Right? Like 500 shirts, right? So the first 500 shirts will pay for the screen printing equipment. The rest will pay for maintenance. Like, I don't know.
So
I
that
think
almost requires, maybe we don't call it profit because that sounds bad to you, but like almost like a fee for growth, like a little bit of money that we're going to charge you for every product that we're going to save. We're not going to pocket, but we're going to save for if we want to expand our product offering or add a sticker to every
exactly
box, right? Like,
yeah, like there's an investment fund, reinvestment fund baked into the thing, which is profit. Like I'm not in denial that is profit. Like Ghost, the company I talked about a couple weeks ago, the CMS that I really like, that's a nonprofit. They make a profit at this nonprofit. It's just that in a nonprofit, all of your profit is reinvested back into the mission of the nonprofit. No one gets to take the money home, right? And so I'm not anti-profit. Profit is just a word that means the money left over after exploitation. You're right, exactly. It's what is done and what is the percentage of. Again, back to our earlier conversation. Are you maximizing gain, right? And maximizing the profit gained, or are you trying to minimize harm, which like you can think of a very, very little harm as like charging your customers more than you have to.
This is such a hot topic. I enjoy chatting about it. Whenever I kind of get into this idea of, profit, it makes me think about wealth accumulation, which makes me think about income inequality. And I think, our country, the United States, is doing so much right. Like we're leading the world in so many areas. We have our own challenges, but I think one of our biggest challenges, at least, in the cities, is income inequality. I think that's a serious driver, and addressing it is hard. Seems difficult. Seems like we need some powerful leadership. We need regulation. We need, activists. We need a lot to combat it. But so many issues are downstream, I think, from that. So more companies like your t-shirt company make the world a better place.
Exactly. And if you want to hear more about how to become one of these companies that is striving for more economic justice in the world, subscribe to Just Business over on YouTube. Henry, thank you so much for another great episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you're listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.